so good to see all of you. Thank you very much for joining us in this Sunday morning. There are some new faces here. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And good. We are going to start off our meeting today with a harmonization text from this book, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, from Francisco Cândido Xavier by Emmanuel. And then we are going to start our public meeting today, that we're going to talk about Peter denial. But before we started, I would like just to give you some reminders of our activities in at FSS. For those that are new, that don't know, and for those that are here, just a kind reminder that we have other studies during the week that we would like to welcome you to join us. Those studies are online, okay, so it's better because you don't need to commute to FSS, and will be very good to have you with us. So we have the Spiritist book reflective study on Wednesdays from 8:30 to 9:30. We study the questions from the Spiritist book, but we don't only read and provide the answers, but we reflect upon them, how we can bring those knowledge to our lives. So it's a very productive type of study. It's very good. We feel that we kind of understand a little bit more our doctrine. We also have the youth group that happens every and each Tuesday from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. We have some youth group, every second, sorry. Bi-weekly, I'm sorry, yes. Keep mixing up this. So we meet here. It's a presence meeting. So if you want to join us, would be like if you have some youth in your family that would like to join.
14 to 25.
Huh?
14 to 25.
Yes, 14 to 25. So.
Oh, damn it.
So close.
So close.
But you can join anyways.
I know.
You can come and have fun with our youth group. They have been reflecting a lot about God, about the Spirit's book, and has been very, very good. And also we have the Gospel according to Spiritism. This study is in Portuguese and happens every first Monday of each month. And it's online again. It's from 8:30 to 9:30, and it's another very good way to join us and to study a little bit more about the doctrine. Okay, so. Oh yes, and we have the soup lunch today, and we invite all of you to stay with us after the public meeting and the passes, because we are going to have some soup today. And it would be nice to stay longer here with us, and after taste this delicious soup that we have here, and also to get together, spend some quality time together. It'd be great. Perfect. Thanks so much. There is anything else?
No.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so before we start our reflection today, let's start with our harmonization text. So the text is the number 89 from The Way, the Truth, and the Life book, and it's entitled Peter's Failure. But Peter followed him at a distance to the courtyard of the high priest, and upon entering, he sat among the servants to see the outcome. Matthew chapter 26, verse 58. Failure, as much as any success, has its positive costs. Peter's denial has always been an interesting subject in Christian communities. Could the moral downfall of the Master's benevolent friend have been great? Why would Simon refuse to cooperate with the Lord at such a difficult time? In this particular, it is useful to examine Peter's carelessness. The loving fisherman's failure lies in his lack of attention to the warnings he had been given. There are a lot of modern-day disciples who share in those very same denials because they are inattentive. The Gospel states that in the hour of Christ's ultimate toil, Simon Peter followed him at a distance. He entered the courtyard of the high priest and sat amongst the servants to see the outcome. A careful reading of the text shows us the meaning, and we can see that even today, many friends of the gospel fail in their aspirations and hopes by following Christ at a distance because they fear having to give up their immediate gratifications. When they are called to bear witness, they linger in the neighborhood of redemptive struggles amongst servants of utilitarian conventions, using binoculars in order to see what the outcome of others' toils will be. Under such circumstances, every modern-day disciple will fail and weep bitterly. So, after this very profound message from Emmanuel, let's do our initial prayer. Let's close our eyes. Sit comfortable in our chairs. Take a deep breath. And connect ourselves with Jesus, our Master, that come once again to invite us to be His disciples. Let's try to pay more attention to His teachings. Let's open our hearts Let's open our hearts to learn from Peter's imperfections at that time, and also understand how he was able to overcome his negative feelings and changing himself to be the rock of the Christianity of all times. Let's see how can we apply those examples in our own lives. Let's be grateful for this moment of learning and reflection. May Jesus and His benevolence can assist us in our own questions and reflections today and also in everyday struggles that we have in our lives. May Jesus be with us. So be it. All right. I don't think you have to. Thanks. How are you doing? Good. Okay. Tem aqui, mas esses é melhor. This is better because this will share. Good. Perfect. All right, so today we are going to keep reflecting upon this text from the Good News. For those that don't know, this is the book that we are going to use to reflect today, and we are going to use this one too. So we are going to try to understand a little bit deeper this teaching from Jesus when he told Peter, I'll tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. We're not here to just, see what Peter did wrong, the wrongdoings of Peter. But mostly we are here to learn from him. Because all the feelings that he had at that time, we still have. And how can we use his example to know ourselves better and to help us with our own struggles in life? So this book, for those that don't know, and we also have it in Portuguese version, the name is Boa Nova. Was written by Chico Xavier, psychographed actually, and the spirit that dictated to Chico was Humberto de Campos. Humberto de Campos was a very known journalist in Brazil that discarnated, and when he was in the spiritual realm, he went to a school of the gospel. Several schools of the gospel exist in the spiritual dimension. And he learned from the benevolent spirits there how was some passages from the gospel. And he brought in this book 1/3 of the passages from the gospel seen by the spiritual dimension. And some of those passages, we can see some private conversations that disciples had with Jesus. And those are very useful for us because we can see that the disciples, they were not perfect. They were not saints. They were just ordinary men, fishermen, that didn't know. And they learned from Jesus. And they had conflicts, they had their own problems, and they Jesus helped them to overcome their own imperfection. So we're going to use their examples to help ourselves, to learn from them. We have been reflecting upon several texts from this book, but today we're going to see what we can learn from this one. It's the text 26. Okay, here we go. So before we start, I would like to give, we're going to start to reflect, we're going to do a wrap-up of what we have learned in our previous meeting from the same text. We reflect upon the paragraph first and the second paragraph. So I would invite you, and this is what we have been doing, I would like to invite one of you, the one that feels comfortable doing that, to read the first and the second paragraph that you have in your hands there. Can I have one volunteer, please? Thank you, too.
Okay. So, Peter's denial. The Messiah's act of washing his disciples' feet was met with some incomprehension on the part of Simon Peter. The old fisherman was not in agreement with such an act of extreme submission. And when his turn came, he resolutely asserted, "No, Master, you shall never wash my feet. My companions are being ungrateful and insensitive, letting you do this as if you were a common slave." Having said this, he gave the group a look of reproach and contempt. Jesus responded, "Simon, do not strive to be better than your fellow apostles in any of life's circumstances. In truth, I can assure you that, without my help, you will not participate with my Spirit in the supreme joys of redemption." Peter settled down somewhat, hushing the voice of his almost childlike benevolence. When the lesson was over, having returned to his place at the table, the Master appeared lost in deep thought. But then, implying that his spiritual vision was disclosing upcoming events, he stated, "The hour of my final testimony is at hand. I have seen in advance that all of you will scatter at the supreme moment. That is only natural, however, for you are not yet ready to do anything except to learn. But before I leave, I want to give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you may be known as my disciples, not for your superiority in the world, not for your demonstration of spiritual powers, nor for the clothes you were in this life, but for revealing the love with which I have loved you, for the humility that should adorn your souls, and for nourishing a good disposition in self-sacrifice.
All right, so let's try to bring very quickly here what we have reflected upon those two first paragraphs. So we see in the first paragraph that Peter disagreed with Jesus' action, right? He was resistant. The first moment he didn't want that Jesus washed his feet, and he was being very resistant to learn. And also, he was criticizing his fellow apostles, disciples. He was demonstrating prejudiced behavior when he said that Jesus was not a common slave. So just to give you a quick context about that time, the story about that time, the ceremony of the feet, to wash the feet, was very common at that time. But it was performed by the slaves. The slaves used to wash the master's feet, not the contrary. They could not understand that. And Peter was only reacting in the same way that any other Jewish from that time would react, by saying, no, you are my master. How can you wash my feet? My fellow companions, they are being very ungrateful. How they can allow that you do that? But what Jesus was doing here, he was exemplifying how to be humble, how to be a servant leader. The leader is the one that serves. He said that in some moments. He said that I'm not here to be served. I am here to serve you. So he was not only teaching by saying, he was also teaching by acting. So, and Peter could not understand that at that moment. And he also inviting them to learn from him. When he says, without my help, Peter, you will not participate with my spirit in the supreme joys of redemption. So he was saying, learn from me. You need to learn from me. I'm here to help you, but learn from me. Don't be resistant to my teachings. So that's what Jesus was trying to say to Peter in that moment, right? And then in the second paragraph, we'll see that Jesus, he touched a little bit in those two questions from the Spirit's book. When he says, he was predicting what is going to happen to her right after the whole supper, right? And he was saying that all of you will scatter at the supreme moment. So when I will be crucified, when I'll be arrested and punished by the Roman people and the priests of the Jewish priests, you will not be there with me. You will flee. He knew that because they were not ready yet. They were there to do anything except to learn. Jesus knew that they could not be there for him. They will be afraid of what the circumstance that would happen very soon. And in the question 115 of the Spirit's book, Kardec will ask, are some spirits created good and others bad? So the answer is, God created all spirits simple and unaware, meaning lack of knowledge. God has given them each a particular mission to enlighten them and help them gradually reach perfection through the knowledge of the truth and rise closer to Him. So we then know that Jesus was telling them they were apprentices. You are here to do anything except to learn. So He was telling them that they were created simple and unaware, so they were there to learn, as all of us are here to learn. This is our main purpose in life, to be apprentice. Apprentice of what? Apprentice of life, apprentice of Jesus' teachings, to be less resistant to His teachings, to open our hearts and see what life wants me to learn. What does life is telling me to do in this very circumstance that I am struggling to develop the virtue that I need? To be humble, to be more fraternal, to act in a different way other than react, right? So in another part here in the same text, He says, I want to give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Why it's a new commandment? Which other commandments they knew?
The 10 Commandments.
The 10, that's right. What are the two main ones that Moses
You
has?
shall not kill.
No, the two main ones that Jesus has told to the highest priest. When he asked, what are the two commandments, the main two commandments? Yes, to love God above all, and to love
Each other.
your neighbors as you love yourself. Right? Those are the two main commandments. And then Jesus was teaching them a new one, which was that you love one another as I have loved you. So Jesus was putting Himself, or setting Himself, as a role model. Where we can see that in the Spirit's book, in the question 625, when Kardec is going to ask, what is the most perfect type that God has offered to human beings as their guide and model? And that we were going to see the shortest answer in Spirit's book. When the benevolent spirits say, look at Jesus. So Jesus is putting Himself here to the apostles and to ourselves, of course, as apprentices of Him, to follow His teachings and to look at Him as a model, because He was exemplifying the virtues to the apostles at that moment, specifically the virtue of humility, the virtue of serve one another, love one another. Any comments or any questions? I'm seeing my faces.
I think the only comment I would have is, it's at the time they didn't quite grasp the idea that Jesus replaced, like, love God above all else, but all the other 9 commandments were negatives. Don't kill, don't. Jesus summarized all the other 9 in one positive: love one another.
Perfect.
Because that will cover, because if you truly love one another, you will not kill.
Do anything.
You will not desire your neighbor's wife. You will not cheat. You will not, like, all of that is covered with love. So out of all the 9 negatives, He brought one positive that covered all of them.
Only a pure spirit could do that, right? It's amazing. Thanks so much, Renata. Very good reminder. And yeah, that's what we have learned here from those 2 paragraphs. So let's move on and see what the other paragraphs has to teach us. Somebody else could read that for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana.
Seeing that once more Jesus was making farewell recommendations, Peter gave expense to his restless temperament. Where, in fact, are you going, Lord? The Master replied, You are not yet ready to follow me. The testimony involves sacrifice and extreme selflessness. Only later you will come into possession of such essential fortitude. However, desirous of proving to his companions the worth of his dedication, Simon added emphatically, meaning to gain the Messiah's trust in him. I cannot follow you? Do you doubt my courage, Master? So am I not a man? For you I will give my very life. Jesus smiled and answered, Peter, your restlessness makes you worthy of new lessons. Experience will teach you better conclusions, for in truth, I tell you that this very night the rooster will not crow before you have denied me 3 times. So, do you consider me to be such a bad and hardened spirit? The fisherman asked, No, Peter, I do not consider you to be ungrateful or indifferent to my teachings. Even so, today you will learn that human beings are more fragile than they are perverse.
Thank you, Mariana. Okay, so great lesson, right? So Peter was insisting on to prove himself to others, to his companions, to Jesus. His focus was outside, exterior. He was trying to show to others what he was not yet. He was in this process of, I am pretending that I am, but I'm not there yet. But I don't understand, or I don't recognize that I'm not there yet. He was not realizing, or he was not, how can I say that? He was not recognizing his own feelings. But Jesus had profound knowledge of each of his disciples, as he has a profound knowledge of each of us. In John, we will see that he said that my Father gave all you to me, and none of the sheep of my Father will be lost. I know each of you by your name. And he said that also to Joana de Cusa when she was seeking for him, for his advice. She knocked on Peter's house to talk to Jesus, and Jesus just said, "Come on in, Joana." And when she opened the door, she looked at him and said, "Master, how do you know me? I have never talked to you before." And he said, "I know each of the sheep of my Father." So he knows us profoundly, and he knew profoundly the disciples, each of them. And it was not only Peter. Here we see that only Peter is speaking, but not only him was having the same thoughts. So all the other disciples followed him when he said, "I will give my very life for you." All the other disciples said, "No, yes, we are going to do the same." But they all scattered at the moment. He was not recognizing his fear, his insecurity. He was trying to, we have a very good expression here in English that says, "Fake until you make it." He was doing that. But this doesn't mean that you're really understanding a lesson. That doesn't mean that you're really doing, right? Recognizing what is my imperfection? What I'm feeling now? Oh, I'm feeling fear. So how can I welcome this fear to transform it into security and self-confidence? So if you don't recognize our negative feelings, we cannot transform them, because we only can transform what we know.
You can't fix something you don't know is broken.
Exactly, right? So here we see.
He probably believed that. That's how he felt. He believed he was a good servant, and he believed that he was doing everything right.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he was confronting somehow Jesus, saying, well, he almost saying like, you're wrong, master, because I know, but kind of like, but he still had that pride, and he always had that restlessness, right? Like that's how it's portrayed as being. And I think his will to do good, he just was so impulsive too, right?
Perfect.
Not stopping to think before he would act. But
He was not acting, he was reacting.
yeah,
He was not reflecting
yeah.
before. He was not, like we said in the first beginning, he was not opened to learn from Jesus. He was only trying to prove Jesus that he already knew everything, right? And because of his impulsive actions, Jesus was telling him, you worthy of new lessons. You need to have new lessons, Peter. And I'll tell you, today, before the rooster crow, you will deny me 3 times. Because Jesus had this prediction power, right? He was a pure spirit, so he was able to see in advance what would happen. We can say, but Sonia, how about the free will? Because Jesus can predict what Peter will do. But if Peter decides to think about it and then decide to make good choices, this could happen? Sure, yes.
Yeah, but he knew them well.
But Jesus knew Peter very well, and he knew that in that moment he was not understanding anything. He was resistant.
And all the disciples have specific characteristics, right?
Yes.
That if we think about, I won't cover all of our wrongdoings, but it kind of touches a little bit in all of us, in a sense. So we all have some difficulties, insecurities, not the same, but so it's almost like that he didn't choose them because they were perfect, but because they could learn and be a good example for all of us too, right? That's how I feel.
And that's why it's so good to read and see that, because it's just like you empathize. It's like if he chose perfect spirits, if he chose people without flaw, then it's so far from myself. How am I going to be inspired? So when you see that, and one thing that pops up to me is like the pride. Like he was proud and he thought he was better than the others. And how many times we don't do that in our lives too. It's just like when we judge, even without saying, and we say, but so and so, this is, can you imagine, this is ridiculous, this person thinks or does that, and it's just like, at least recognize and say, I'm judging, and my act is like, I'm thinking I'm better, because you can only judge if you're in a position that you see the things and you're different. And that's what I like about Peter. It's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. The others, yes, they are different, and I stand out. I am better. And when things happen, you see the flaws and you see the humanity there that he's not.
Thank you, Juliana. That's the main purpose of this talk. To bring us closer to the apostles.
And Jesus' foresight, it's not just that he will be denied, but Jesus also says, you are not ready now, but in the future, you will understand.
Thank you.
So he also knew that was part of the process. Like we say, trust the process. That was part of the process. So the whole denial, the scattering, it was all part of the process so that they could finally understand and then propagate his message.
That's great, because this is the law of progress that we are all subject to. So we will learn one day everything that we need to be pure spirits, to be virtuous in all senses, right? Because that's the law of progress, that we will all progress, that we all evolve. And Jesus knew that at that moment, Peter was not ready in that moment, at the Holy Supper of the ceremony of the feet wash, but he will be later, in that very moment.
sometimes takes time. In my profession, we don't recognize a senior professional even if there is advanced technical skills, because if this doesn't have some life experience, how to use that technical skills to solve the problem. Because you need to have experience of failures, not only success or not only
Theory.
hard study theory and technical skills.
Perfect, right? Very good. We are getting there. We can see that we are progressing too, right? Good.
Pat on everyone's back, please. Let's recognize, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, can anyone please read the next paragraph for us?
I can.
Thank you, Juliana.
Simon Peter did not want to believe the Messiah's claims about him, and as soon as the arrest was made, he tried to demonstrate his fearlessness to defend the gospel of the kingdom by attacking one of the servants of the high priest of Jerusalem with a sword, compelling the master to harshly rebuke him. Just as Jesus said, the apostolic college had indeed scattered in that moment of supreme resolutions. The crass humility in surrendering himself had disappointed some of them, since they could not comprehend the transcendence of that far-off sublime kingdom of God. When Peter and John saw that master's arrest by the temple envoys was an accomplished fact, they followed at a distance. The cortege was leading him away. They looked in vain for the other disciples who, fearful of persecution, had scattered.
Thank you, Juliana. So we see here that only John and Peter stayed. And we also see that that Peter was demonstrating his impulsivity when he was trying to attack, or again trying to show Jesus that he was brave, right? So he was attacking the servant of the high priest with the sword, and Jesus, no, don't do that. And then Jesus, yes, asked them, don't do that. It's not. This is not what I have been trying to teach you all during all day today. But he was again reacting. He was not thinking, reflecting, and trusting Jesus. All the apostles, here we see, had disappointment. They were disappointed because they thought that Jesus would be able to free himself, like Judas Iscariot, because we think, okay, Judas was betrayed Jesus, and we say so many bad stuff about him, but he had one thing in mind. Jesus is here to free us from the Romans, and he is powerful enough to free us and to free himself. He's not going to be captive by the Jewish people. He's not going to be killed by them, because he has all the power.
He wanted to prove that
Yes.
Jesus could do that he was going to be the warrior that the Jewish people had been waiting for.
Exactly. He was just trying to give Jesus a little bit push. Go there.
Like thinking they knew better.
Yes. Again, he thought he didn't understand the message. The same way that the other disciples didn't understand the
And
message.
I think what shows very clearly that Jesus understood that they didn't understand the message is the last line of the previous paragraph, when Jesus says, even so, today you will learn that human beings are more fragile than they are perverse. So they had good intentions. Judas had good intentions according to what he understood the Messiah to be. Peter had good intentions defending Jesus, cutting the soldiers here. They all had good intentions, so it wasn't perverse. They didn't do it in an evil way.
Yes.
But the fragility of them not understanding the message, not reflecting, not understanding their own feelings, led them to react as opposed to reflect and act.
Exactly.
And there is a question in the Spiritist book that asks, does evil really exist? It doesn't. It's about ignorance.
Ignorance.
We're ignorant of the divine laws. And we are here in this process to get to know more.
That's what the question 115 says. We are created unaware, lacking of knowledge. So we are here to learn two things. The knowledge, the truth, through our experiences. So here we see the disciples going through a very hard experience. Can you imagine that time? That you could, like, they could kill you and all your family, and so much pressure, and lots of power people, evil people that were more fragile than evil. But, you know, they were in that, like, they were feeling that they had the protection of Jesus. That Jesus will protect them.
Yeah, he's the Messiah.
He was the Messiah.
He's invincible.
Right? But then Jesus just surrounded himself, and they could not understand. So let's keep moving on. But thank you so much for all the comments, and it has been great. Anyone can please read the next paragraph?
I can.
Thank you, Renata.
I'll try. I don't have my glasses.
Oh my gosh.
However, both wanted to give Jesus the necessary help. Who knows? Mightn't they find a way to save him, perhaps? They had to make sure they knew all the facts. They would have recourse to their humble acquaintances in Jerusalem on behalf of the beloved Master. They understood the magnitude of the danger and the threats that waited on their heads every now and then. They were astonished at statements by individuals in the crowd who accused Jesus of being a sorcerer or a heretic. John decided to return to Bethany to bring Jesus' mother up to date on the events, while Peter mingled with the crowd to observe how he might be of use to the Messiah. In all circles, the Christ was called as a traitor or a common revolutionary. His teaching was mocked, his exemplification mocked, and there were also plenty of those who openly declared that the Nazarene prophet had arrived in the city at the head of a band of robbers.
Okay. So here this gives us a little bit of understanding of the environment in that moment, right? They were they were feeling the danger and the threats that were waving their heads. They were very worried about Jesus. They want to help Jesus, so they want to give Jesus the necessary help, both disciples. So they were trying to come up with a plan to help Jesus. So Peter said, okay, I'm going to be among all the servants of the high priest so I can understand what's going on. So maybe we can see if we can reach out to someone in Jerusalem that could help Jesus. And John said, okay, I'm going to go and talk to Mary to bring her up to date to what is going on here. So we see that, as Renata said, they had good intention. All of them. The other ones, they were afraid. They fled because they were afraid. Peter and John was very young in that time. He was only 14 years old. And Peter was older, and he was very close to Jesus. So he could not let the master alone. But he could not be close enough because he was afraid for himself. And that's what we're going to see in the next paragraph. But before we go there, I just would like to talk a little bit about the duality of Peter. Because sometimes he was very, careful about Jesus. He showed much in several moments with Jesus that he was connected with the message. He could understand very well. And Jesus had said to him in a circumstance that he would be the rock of the Christianity. He was relying on him in his resolution and his pure of intention that he would take the Christianity for the rest of the time. And he also said Peter also said that Jesus had eternal words, that he could be with us forever. So he loved Jesus so much. He cared about Jesus so much. So much so that Jesus stayed in his house during all the Messianic time. Jesus was a guest in Peter's house. He was treated as a family member. So they were very close. But at the same time, he was afraid. He was reacting upon Jesus. He was calling Jesus' attention. Hey, you cannot do that. Why you're talking about where you're going? Like, very close to Jesus, very understanding his lessons. Sometimes he was doubting, questioning. So, do we do that too? Sometimes we are very fraternal, we welcome the differences, we understand other people's behavior or acting upon us. We use the compassion, the love, and the forgiveness, and sometimes we just react because we are still learning. We are still in that moment that we fluctuate between virtues and egoistic feelings. So that's what the feeling of Peter. But what can we do to change that?
I think, sorry, I was just going to say, I think this underscores what Renata was saying about, it's really more about how fragile we are.
Excellent.
And I mean, we've been focusing on the apostles, but this last paragraph that was just read, I think underscores how it applies so much more generally, because if you look at the way that the crowd reacted, just 1 week before that, on Palm Sunday, the entire city of Jerusalem, like, you welcomed him in with like palm leaves, as if he was a king riding in on a steed, you know, even though he was on a mule at the time. And so you had an entire city that just completely changed their entire perspective on the same person that they knew just a week before that, simply because of, you know, the weight of expectation and the sense of, you know, what the general sentiment is of the people around us. And that can be so powerful. And it's, you know, I mean, case in point, how difficult it is for any of us when we find ourselves in an environment where everybody is behaving one way, for us to say no or choose a different path. And so I think it's kind of just ties in this you know, this sense of understanding that Jesus had, not just for his apostles, but for every single soul in Jerusalem and that exists, because we all are dealing with that regularly in our lives then and today. And you know, it's it can be really significant, that weight of expectation that comes, that really isn't a reflection of our perversity, but just of how, you know, sensitive and fragile we can be to changing, you know, changing sentiment, and have the same person look at, you know, the glass in two different ways.
Exactly. Thank you so much for bringing this up.
Yeah, our biases, right?
Yes.
So while I can be extremely empathetic towards one person, somebody who did me wrong, it's not going to be as easy to empathize with that person without much reflection, without like working on it. If we just go by instinct, by gut reaction, it's I empathize, I don't empathize.
Yes.
But where is my reflection? So it's Peter, it's the reaction instead of the reflection and action. Is it right? Is it okay to empathize with one and not the other? Is it fair? Is it loving? Is it charitable? So, but it takes hard work.
Hard work, efforts, and this is the main point here, right? How can we be more reflective? How can we instead react? We could start acting with a more virtual way. So this book here, from where I took most of those reflections today, because there is a paragraph, or actually a chapter, entire chapter, where the author, Alírio Cerqueira Filho, he talks about Peter's behavior in this moment, or actually in all the moments that he had with Jesus, when he was showing this his duality. and also we can learn from him how we can overcome our duality too? How can we change our behaviors to be more flexible? So here's the one of the advices. We can only transform our duality by connecting with the divine laws in our conscience and practicing the virtues. And this comes along with the question 115 from the Spirit's book that says that we have a mission, and we are invited to know the truth, and then we can arise closer to God. So, what is the truth?
Divine laws.
Divine laws. And that's the question that Pilatus asked Jesus at the supreme moment, and Jesus just remained in silence. And that's the question that, that's what the expression, or not the teaching from Jesus when he says, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's the truth, the divine laws, that we all have in our conscience, as the question 621 says. Where is the natural laws, the divine laws, in your conscience? But how can we read them? Because if they are in our conscience, if they are written in our conscience, how can we read them?
We need to
ChatGPT.
connect.
ChatGPT? Thank you, Luis.
I think first of all, we need to want to reconnect with the divine laws. We need to allow ourselves to connect with them, because we have the free will of connecting or not. So
That's right.
I think we need to choose to connect with them by taking that deep in ourselves.
That's right. So in that moment that Attila described, and when everybody is going to one direction, how can we then make good choices? How can we, instead of going with the flow, we just stop and allow ourselves to connect with the divine laws by reflecting, by thinking about what we have been learning here, what we have been learning from the Gospel according to Spiritism, from the Spirit's book, from the studies that we provide here weekly, from those readings, right? From our prayers, because it's in our conscience. So how can we dig in through reflections, and also through our own mistakes? Because when we make not very good choice, we had the consequences of that choice, right? Because as the free will, we have the free will that is connected with the responsibility, the law of the responsibility, and the law of cause and effect. So everything that we do, we have the consequences of that action.
Not only bad, but good as well.
Good as well, because the law, it's neutral. So if we do good, we have the good in return. If we decide to not act in a lovely way, we will receive the reflections of that act. So when we do that, when we are passing through a situation where we have some conflicts in our consciences for something that we have done, what is the invitation?
To reflect and make an adjustment.
And then learn from them. That's the only thing that we can do. Learn from our own experiences and mistakes. So as the same invitation that Jesus provided to the first disciples, learn from it. Without my help, you're not going to share with me the sublimes life in the kingdom of heaven. So learn from him. And that's the invitation that he provides us through his all teachings. Come to me, all you that overwhelmed, and I'll give you the rest. My yoke is light, meaning that his teachings is love, represents the love that we are all invited to follow. So the message that I would like to leave with you today is mainly the apprentice feeling. Feel that we are apprentices, not judge ourselves, not condemn ourselves, not feel guilty for whatever we have done. This is what we could do at that time, but learn from our actions, learn from our own mistakes, and try to do better. That's what we are here for.
That requires gentleness. Gentleness with ourselves, because
Compassion.
yeah, oftentimes, you know, the best moments to learn are when we actually make a mistake,
Yes.
rather than when we, you know, succeed, because it's easy to, you know, just take the win and then leave the reflection aside and just pat ourselves on the back and say, all right, I'm good, keep moving on. Yeah, but
I got this.
exactly. But when we have that experience of something that we know did not go the way, that's when we have that context, that variability, which maybe is one of the great gifts of this life, rather than in the discarnate world, because we have constant variability, we have constant feedback, opposing experiences and focuses that we can reflect on. And even from a scientific perspective, the power of this, when it's harnessed, there's a developmental psychologist named Carol Dweck that studies children. And anyways, without getting into all the nuts and bolts, the long and short of it is that she set up a study that was trying to get students that were very poor school boards in the United States to perform better. And so all they did was they changed the way the teacher spoke to the kids. Rather than you pass and you fail and then giving them a big F or something like that, they got rid of all failure, and they only had pass and succeed or not yet. And that was the word that they would say to any student that still had room to improve, not yet. And that's the only change they made. Everything else was the same. And what they did was they took this to some of the worst school boards, places where you had a lot of, you know, family issues, violence, poverty, and even in Aboriginal communities, Native communities that traditionally are the worst school boards. And within 6 months of doing this, these school boards started outperforming the Wall Street Journal kids that were living, because this was in New York, that were living like around Wall Street and just outperforming everybody. That one change in word, without anything else, drastically changed the entire outcome of all these students that still had all those same problems. But somehow, how are they now better than everybody else? And so I feel, you know, the weight of that is just endless if we allow it to be.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Comes along what Jesus has taught here, right? They are just doing what Jesus did with the apostles.
Yes.
You're not ready yet.
Yes, exactly.
Yet. So you will be ready, right? So it's a trust that Jesus has in us. And also, I just would like to remind again the first sentence that we read here in this book, when Emmanuel says, failure, as much as any success, has its positive causes. So learn from our own failures. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Looks like we're going to need to come back to the same text again next week or so. So you can keep the text, or you just can return here afterwards, so we can keep reflecting upon the rest of this text. That it's amazing. We have so much to learn from it. So let's do our final prayer and then our classes. So once again, let's take a deep breath and connect ourselves with our guardian angels and with Jesus, our Master. Thanking Him for this wonderful moment that we spent together. These moments of reflections and learning that helped us with our own thoughts, our own problems and issues that we have in our hearts. May our Lord help us to open our hearts to be more the apprentices of His love. Nowadays, taking advantage of this opportunity that we have to be here in this very moment, learning, living, experiencing all the opportunities that the life is bringing us. Thank you, Master, for being with us today. Thank you, our guardian angels, for providing us insights, reflections. May our Jesus friend be with us for the rest of this day, for the rest of this week, giving His peace to our heart and embracing us in all the struggles that we will experience in the following days. And above all, thank you, God, for providing us with this opportunity to get together in fraternity and with the spirit of learning. Thank you for this moment. Thank you for the FSS and for all the benefits that we have from here.